May I help you?
Yeah, operator, where's the nearest telephone?
You're speaking from the nearest telephone center.
Oh,
You picked up the telephone in the hallway, and before you heard anyone else's voice in the world, you heard hers. Number, please. She said it the same way every time. Calm, patient, ready. You told her the number, or you told her the name, and she connected you. You never saw her face, and you never knew her last name, but she knew yours. She was the telephone operator, and there is nobody alive under 40 who knows what that voice sounded like. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from.
It's a very private call now. You're not going to be listening, are you?
Well, I won't even be on the line, sir, while the number's just in...
You're going to get off the line as soon as I get the party, right?
Right, there will be no one on the line.
Okay.
Number, please. You have to start with those two words because those two words were the beginning of every phone call you ever made as a child in America in the 1950s and the 1960s. You did not dial a number yourself. You could not. You picked up the heavy black receiver, you put it to your ear, and the operator came on. Number, please. And you said 82, please, because that was your grandmother's number. Or you said Boonton 83565 because that was your aunt in New Jersey. Or you said I need the doctor because your little brother just fell off the porch and you were 12 years old and your mother was not home and you did not know what else to do. And the operator said, "Hold on, honey, I will connect you right now." And she did. She connected you. She was the voice between you and the rest of the world. She was the first person you spoke to every time you needed to speak to someone. And she has been gone for almost 50 years, and you can still hear her in your head right now. Number, please. The small town. You have to talk about the small town. Because in a small town in America in the 1950s, the telephone operator was not just a voice on a wire. She was the center of the community. They called her Central. Her switchboard was in a building on Main Street, or above the bank, or in the back of the general store. Sometimes the switchboard was in her own home, and she was on duty 24 hours a day. She sat in front of a panel with rows of signal lights and holes for jacks and pairs of cords with plugs on both ends. When a light came on, she plugged in and said, "Number, please." When the caller told her the number, she plugged the other cord into the right jack and turned a little key to ring the phone. 2 shorts and a long for the Petersons. 1 long and 2 shorts for the Hendersons. She knew every ring pattern for every family on every party line in town. And she knew more than numbers. She knew everything. If you called and asked for the doctor, she did not just ring his office. She knew he was out on a call at the Morrison farm, and she would try the Morrison number for you. If you asked for your husband, she knew he had left the hardware store 10 minutes ago and was probably on his way home. If you were an 11-year-old girl calling from a payphone and you said you wanted to talk to your mother and you did not have a nickel, the operator said, "Hold on, sweetheart," and connected you anyway. One operator from a small town in Idaho said years later, "I would always figure it out. It was a very nice time. It really was." The party line. You have to understand the party line. In the 1940s and the 1950s, most families in small towns did not have a private phone line. They shared a line with 3, 4, or sometimes 10 other families. When the phone rang, everybody on the line heard it ring. The ring pattern told you which family the call was for. 2 short rings meant the Johnsons. A long ring and a short ring meant the Millers. If the call was not for you, you were supposed to hang up quietly. But of course, you did not hang up. You listened. They called it rubbering. Everybody did it. There's a famous story about 2 women talking on a party line, and one said, "Be careful what you say, Dorothy might be listening." Then Dorothy's voice came through the receiver. She said, "I am not," and hung up. That was the party line. That was America before privacy existed. And somehow nobody minded because everybody already knew everybody else's business and the telephone operator knew the most. One story that gets told over and over is the young man who called the operator and asked to be connected to Mary Jane because he wanted to ask her to the dance. Mary Jane said no. The young man hung up and called the operator back and said, "Ring Sarah Smith." And the operator said, "She already has a date too." That was central. She was not being nosy, she was being efficient. She had already heard both conversations that day, and she was saving the young man a nickel. That was how small towns worked. The operator was the switchboard and the newspaper and the guidance counselor and the emergency dispatcher all in one woman, sitting at a panel of lights in a room above the bank at 2 in the morning, waiting for a call that might not come until dawn. The child who needed to call home. This is the one that matters most. Because if you were a child in America in the 1950s or the 1960s and you needed to reach your mother and you did not have any money, you picked up a telephone and the operator answered and you said, "I need to call my mother and I do not have a nickel." And the operator did not say, "I am sorry, I cannot connect you without payment." She said, "What is your mother's number, sweetheart?" And she connected you every time. No charge, no paperwork, no policy manual. Just a woman whose job description said connect calls, but whose heart said connect this child to his mother right now. That is what the telephone operator was. She was the human being in the machine. She was the mercy in the system, and there is nothing in any phone you own today that comes close to what she was. Emma Nutt, you should know who she was. In September of 1878, Alexander Graham Bell himself walked into a telephone dispatch office in Boston and hired a young woman named Emma Nutt to be the first female telephone operator in the world. She was 17 years old. She earned $10 a month for a 54-hour work week. A few hours after Emma started, her sister Stella became the second female telephone operator in history. Before the Nutt sisters, the phone companies had been hiring teenage boys. The boys were fast, but they were terrible. They cursed at customers. They played pranks. They left calls unanswered when they got bored. One historian wrote that the boys would return the impatient subscribers' profanity with a few original oaths of their own. Bell decided to try a woman instead. Emma had a calm, soothing voice. She had patience, and she remembered every single telephone number in the New England Telephone Company directory. She worked as an operator for 37 years. She loved the job. She never left it. And within 5 years of her hiring, nearly every telephone operator in America was a woman. Because Emma Nutt proved that a woman's voice was the right voice for the job. Patient, clear, kind, professional, and the whole country heard it every time they picked up the phone. The Hello Girls. In 1917, America entered the First World War, and the Army needed telephone operators in France. They needed women who spoke French and English and who could connect calls under pressure in combat zones. 223 American women volunteered. They were sent overseas as the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit. The soldiers called them the Hello Girls because they answered every call with hello. These women connected calls on military switchboards while shells fell around them. They connected generals to field commanders. They connected hospitals to supply lines. They connected soldiers to their wives back home. Female operators could connect 5 calls for every single call a male operator could handle. The telephone was faster than telegraph and more secure than radio because the enemy could not intercept a call the way they could intercept a broadcast. The Hello Girls helped win the war. And when they came home, the United States government told them they were not veterans. They were not soldiers. They were civilians who had volunteered. It took 60 years. In 1977, Congress finally granted the Hello Girls veteran status. Most of them were in their 80s. Many had already passed. The women who connected the calls that helped win a world war had to wait 6 decades for their country to say thank you. Ernestine. If you watch television in the 1970s, you remember Ernestine. Lily Tomlin played her on Laugh-In and later on Saturday Night Live. She was the snorting, power-tripping telephone operator with the headset and the nasal voice. 1 ringy dingy, 2 ringy dingy. Ernestine was funny because every single person in America knew exactly what a telephone operator was. They had all spoken to one. They had all heard the voice. They had all been put on hold or cut off or connected to the wrong number by an operator who was having a long day. Ernestine was the exaggeration of a real person that everybody recognized. And today, nobody under 40 understands why the character was funny, because nobody under 40 has ever spoken to a telephone operator. The joke died with the job, the long-distance call. You have to understand what it meant to make a long-distance call, because long distance was not free. Long distance was not casual. Long distance was serious. If your mother picked up the phone and said, "Operator, I would like to make a long-distance call to area code 314, you knew something important had happened. Somebody had been born. Somebody had passed. It was Thanksgiving, and your grandmother was too far away to visit. You stood in the hallway and you listened to your mother give the operator the number, and then you heard the operator say, "1 moment, please," and there was a series of clicks as the call was patched through one exchange after another across the country. Sometimes it took minutes. Sometimes the circuits were all busy and the operator said, "I will keep trying and call you back when I get through." And she did. She called back. Sometimes an hour later, sometimes 3 hours later. But she called back because she had written your name on a ticket and she was not going to let it go until the call went through. That was the operator. That was the weight of a long-distance call. That was a world where calling someone 3 states away felt like crossing an ocean, and the operator was the woman who carried you across. The operator watched over people. In a small town, she knew things that nobody else knew. She knew which phone lines were active and which were quiet. She knew who called whom every day, and she noticed when somebody stopped calling. There were operators who would ring the house of an elderly person who had not made a call in 2 days just to check. She might ring and say, "Marty, are you all right? I have not heard from you." That was not in the job description. That was not a policy. That was a woman who cared about the people on the other end of the wires. She was the first welfare check in American history. She did it for free because she knew that Mrs. Kowalski on line 39 always called her daughter on Tuesday morning. It was now Wednesday afternoon, and the phone had not rung. She was the invisible net beneath a small town. She caught people before they fell. When the dial system arrived and the switchboard was removed, the operator was gone. Nobody caught Mrs. Kowalski anymore. Nobody noticed when the phone stopped ringing. The machine connected calls, but it did not notice silence. Then the machines came. The first automatic telephone switching system was built in 1892 in LaPorte, Indiana. But it did not work well for large networks. The technology existed for decades before the phone companies used it widely because the economics did not make sense. Every additional customer in an automated system cost more, not less. The operators were actually cheaper than the machines for most of the 20th century. It was not until digital switching arrived in the 1960s that automation finally became more efficient than a woman at a switchboard. Direct dialing spread through the 1960s and the 1970s, first local calls, then long distance. By 1978, AT&T had completed the transition. The last switchboard operators were phased out. 100 years of women connecting America by hand. Done. At their peak in the 1950s, there were more than 350,000 women working as telephone operators for the phone companies alone. Another million worked switchboards at hotels and offices and apartment buildings and factories. 1 out of every 13 working women in America was a telephone operator. It was the profession, the job a girl could get straight out of high school that came with a paycheck and a skill and a place in the community, and it vanished in a single generation. The women who were displaced found other work. They became typists and secretaries and clerks, but nothing they did after the switchboard ever felt quite the same. because nothing else in the American economy had ever put a woman at the center of the entire system. The telephone operator was not support staff. She was the system. Without her, nothing connected. Without her, nobody talked to anybody. She was the most important person in the building, and everybody knew it. If you grew up in a small town in the 1950s, your operator was not a stranger. She was Mrs. Chellis. She was Inga Johnson. She was the woman who lived above the phone office on Main Street and who answered your call at 3 in the morning when your father had chest pains, who stayed on the line until the ambulance arrived, and who called back the next day to ask how he was doing. She was the woman who connected a scared 12-year-old to the doctor when nobody else was home. She was the woman who rang every house on the party line during the tornado warning because there was no other way to tell people. She was the woman who let the children call Santa at Christmas and somehow Santa always answered. She was the last voice you heard at night if you were working the late shift and needed to make a call. And she was the first voice you heard in the morning when you picked up the phone to call your mother and tell her the baby had been born. Number, please. Those two words meant something. They meant someone was listening. They meant someone was ready to help. They meant that between you and the person you needed to reach there was a human being who cared whether the call went through. Today, you tap a name on a screen and the call connects in silence, or it does not connect at all, and nobody explains why. There is no voice, there is no patience, there is no woman saying, "Hold on, honey, I will connect you right now." The telephone operator was the first voice interface in the history of human communication, before Siri, before Alexa, before any automated menu. There was a real woman who answered when you called and who knew your name and who connected you to the people you loved. And she was so good at her job that it took the phone companies 86 years to build a machine that could replace her. And the machine still cannot do what she did. The machine cannot check on the elderly. The machine cannot find your lost children. The machine cannot connect a scared boy to his mother without a nickel in his pocket. The machine connects calls. The operator connected people. And that is a difference that no amount of technology will ever close. If you remember picking up the phone and hearing "Number, please," tell me what town you were in. If your operator knew your family by name, tell me hers. If you ever called long distance and had to go through the operator, and you remember how serious that felt because long distance cost money and you only called long distance for births and Christmas, tell me who you were calling. And if you were ever the child without a nickel and the operator connected you anyway, tell me about it. I read every single comment.